Hello everybody, Robin here at Toadstool Tarot, and I just discovered this deck. It's been out a few months. It's the Tarot of Tales and Legends. I wanted to give you a little background on it because I am very fond of fairy tales and folk tales, and particularly illustrations from the late 1800s. Now, there are a handful of illustrators from the late 1800s that their art has been used in tarot decks within the past few years. And the artwork was not originally intended to be used for tarot cards. So it's one where the images, or I should say the card designations, have been imposed upon the images. Or is it the other way around? In any event, the images were not tailor-made for the card designations. But it's very beautiful art. And there were a handful of artists from that era that I was particularly fond of and introduced to through various children's book collections. And one of them was, the first one I have, I should say, these are all low Scarabeo decks. There's 3 of them here I'm going to reference before I get to the new one. And low Scarabeo often will do artist decks where they will entitle something with an artist name, like the Golden Botticelli or whatever. And they use the images, but then they kind of tweak them or alter them, or often they will even have a whole different artist try to emulate the style of Botticelli or Bosch or whoever, where they're not actually using the original artist's artwork. Now, these decks, on the other hand, these are the original artworks that are being used, so they can be attributed to these artists. I don't really like it when people try to copy, or I don't want to use the word forge, but they try to pass something off as art by a particular artist when it's actually inspired by that artist rather than the artist's actual work. But anyway, these 3 are not. These are sort of historical decks. And in that regard, you need to keep in mind that they may not be politically correct. I don't believe in altering vintage decks to suit the times. However, I do believe that people should know up front that what they're getting may not suit their current sensibilities. So if you were offended by things that were done in society, behaviors, norms, or whatever from 100 or more years ago, maybe this is not the deck for you. I wouldn't push or force anyone to not buy the deck because of that, or to the deck creators to change the deck, to update it to our sensibilities now. But at the same time, I think people should know what they're getting into. So, educate yourselves a little bit. If you're buying something with artwork by someone who lived over 100 years ago, consider the norms and sensibilities of the era in which they live, and give them a little leeway. I mean, don't judge them by your current mode of behavior, what is acceptable now. We have even TV shows from 50 years ago, All in the Family and so forth, that cannot be shown now because they offend current sensibilities. So things change over time. I'm not one for putting swimming trunks on Michelangelo's David, and I don't believe in changing vintage imagery just because some people are particularly sensitive to it. I say, if you're sensitive to it and you don't understand what's going on here, walk away. Don't buy the deck. Don't try to impose your changes on history. So, with that in mind, one of the three people, and the first artist that I admired was Walter Crane, and his deck was the Harmonious Tarot. Now, this particular edition came out through the British or European magazine Total Tarot, that reprints and releases Los Scarabeo decks through their magazine. And I had a friend get this for me, purchase it on my behalf, because they don't ship to the United States. This was previously done and is still available on Los Scarabeo, but the version that they issue here has the old style multiple language titles on it around the border, which I really don't like. They also did a pocket size version that has symbols, I believe, and that one's okay. But the problem with these cards is the images have borders, and they're so detailed that the smaller the images get, the harder they are to read the imagery. So also I should say here, usually when I do recently when I do a walkthrough of a new deck, I will do top-down camera. This deck I have some issues with, and there are plenty of walkthroughs that are much finer detail. I just want to give you a general sense of what's going on here. So this is not a deck I love, and I may not hold on to it, but we'll get into that in a bit. So the Harmonious Tarot is illustrated by Walter Crane. He's from this sort of Art Nouveau, pre-Raphaelite sort of era of or golden age of art and design, and you can see a lot of it is sort of like floral based. And here we have a white border and then an additional decorative border, which further reduces the size of the image. And in the currently available one here, you also have the additional multiple languages, so that reduces it even further. This one is good because it's all in English. It limits the size of the border, but it still has a lot of detail to the imagery that makes it somewhat difficult to read. But I am particularly fond of Walter Crane's imagery, and it's very close also to children's book illustrator Kate Greenaway. I don't believe there is yet a Kate Greenaway tarot, but there probably should be. And if Los Scarabeo is watching, they might want to pursue something like that. So this gives you a general idea of what Walter Crane's imagery is like. Another one that I bought is Edmund Dulac. This is more recently, and he also illustrated for fairy tales and folk tales. And this is a beautiful deck. The problem for me with this deck is the images are rather dark, and sometimes they're very hard to read, even in really good lighting. The paintings aren't the sharpest, and so sometimes it's really a little bit difficult. The figures don't have outlines to them. It's difficult to see what's going on in the details of the imagery. I do appreciate that they have these handsome borders top and bottom on borderless cards with just numbers or symbols on the cards instead of the old style multiple languages. This is a vast improvement. Here we have, this is an illustration from the fairy tale The Princess and the Pea, which you may be familiar with. I don't believe the books in any of these reference the stories that the images were taken from. So those are just a few samples to give you an idea of the art styles, the sort of fairy tale illustrated art styles of Walter Crane and Edmund Dulac. Another one I don't own is, oh dear, what is his name now? Not Baum. It's a Norse illustrator, I think. Somebody will point it out and include it below in the comments, I'm sure. Maybe it'll come to me later. But anyway, let's move on to this current one, Tarot of Tales and Legends. This happens to be imagery from H.J. Ford. Henry, is it J. Ford? Yes. And he is most known for Andrew Lang put out a series of color fairy books, the Blue Fairy Book, the Green Fairy Book, the Lilac Fairy Book, and so the whole rainbow worth of collections of tales that I got when they were published by Dover Books. Now, they may still be available in Dover Book paperback editions, and I would recommend, if you're into fairy tales, then if they are still available, buy them all. There are probably 8 or 10 volumes in the whole Color Fairy series, and they are from various cultures around the world. It's sort of a Grimm's fairy tale collection from many cultures all over the world, not just sort of German or European tradition. And but anyway, they were illustrated by H.J. Ford, and the thing about Ford is his line work is amazing, and the bulk of the books are just black and white line work renderings, which are amazing and I love. However, they usually have at least one or two, a frontispiece or one or two illustrations sprinkled in that were full color paintings, and those don't always communicate as well. The line work isn't as sharp because you don't have outlined figures, you have color paintings, and unfortunately for my aesthetics, that's what this deck is. It's only the color paintings. So I'm not sure if I'm going to hold on to this. I was curious enough to buy it. It's $20-something on Amazon, and I just discovered it by looking through new releases on the Low Scarabeo site, and apparently it's not as new as I thought. It's been out a few months, and if you want to see these in better detail, there are many flip-throughs and walk-throughs. I will show you as quickly as I can, but the images again are sort of randomly assigned. They're very beautifully done paintings, but personally they're not my aesthetic in terms of the color palette, and the detailing is there's a lot of detail, and it's not as sharp as I would prefer. So these are beautiful historic paintings, but it's just not my favored color palette, and it's not the kind of detailing that I require. So this is another one where the images are a little bit harder to see unless you have particularly good lighting. And when you do, there's a lot of reds and oranges and blues. I don't know, a sort of hot and cold colors, but it's not exactly a deck, I would say, even though it's reds and oranges, it feels like an autumn deck. But I can't place why it is that I'm not fond of this color palette. Also, I was surprised that as a low Scarabeo deck, they have moved here away from symbols and done this entirely in English, which is not something that they used to do. I'm not sure how I feel about it. It's great for English-speaking collectors, but for people with other languages, I think the symbols might have been more approachable than forcing English on the collectors of these decks. So anyway, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to continue going through the entire deck here, but I think you get a pretty good idea of what this illustration style is like. And perhaps some of the images identify fairy tales you're familiar with and some don't. As I said, these are from the color fairy books and by Andrew Lang, and a lot of those stories were new to me. There were standard ones in there I was well familiar with, but also many I had never heard before. And I still have yet to get through the entire series. I have all the books, but I've not read all the tales. It's a lot to read, and I tend to have gotten sidetracked by reading a lot of other things over the years. At some point, I hope to make time and go back and read every one of the tales in those books. So, anyway, this is the Tarot of Tales and Legends featuring the artwork of H.J. Ford. And I just thought, for those of you out there that are interested in fairy tale decks or interested in 19th century children's book illustrators, then this might be something that you would want to add to your collection, as well as the other two that I mentioned, the Edmund Dulac and the Harmonious Tarot, using the artwork of Walter Crane. I still can't think of that other Norse figure. Begins with a B. Somebody will put it in below. Anyway, thanks for your patience and thanks for watching, and I will see you all soon.